So let's imagine what it would be like to be a 21st century computational being. It's a fun time and place to be, where we're on the on the precipice of the third revolution, really about how do humans converge with the communication technology, and what does that look like? So I've been imagining some pretty cool things, and I've been looking at the latest research across multiple disciplines, which would start with information dynamics, then neuroscience, with a focus specifically on the neuroscience of kindness. But then this also looks at art, contemplative art practice, and then physics, to understand how energy is actually a force that can create information, and that force is the life force. It is the creation of information, and in particular, it is very interesting to understand what kind of information a complex adaptive system could make, because that is what human beings are. We're made for learning and collaborating. Okay, so I'm making some claims here that information dynamics is the life force of growth. It is the force of energy that creates growth. It's just flows of energy. It leaves patterns of condensed matter in beautiful shapes because of the energy that is driving those dynamic patterns. So for self-adaptive systems, that's what we are as humans. We can kind of come up with a simplest model for what that type of a system would be, and it's called a holon. So we're going to learn about holons. So events are the fundamental unit of energy processing. They're the fundamental unit of reality. Events are really the most fundamental thing. So we're talking about process dynamics, and what's cool is, just like Einstein, he was thinking about these abstractions that essentially apply at cosmological scales, and that is the case. That is where the beauty of this whole endeavor lies, is that we will see that energy itself forms these beautiful fractal patterns, and that our lives are very fractal feeling. We feel, if we can relax into the flow, we should be able to feel the flows of energy pulsing through us. And so the goal would be, how can we, just as Einstein was fascinated by how the compass needle aligned with the magnetic field, right? So it was a field means we have a gradient of change of something across a distance. Well, we're talking about energy fields, and this is a flow, and we want to know how to orient. We need a compass, and that compass is our emotions. So this whole talk is about how we learn to tune our emotions so that we can be in the flow of the life force of the universe, because that is the optimal way to live your life. And it really is about learning from failures, and it's all about learning, because essentially this research is all at the intersection of artificial intelligence and neuroscience of cognition, where the state of the art right now is that each advance that is made in computer science brings an advance to the understanding of learning, and in us understanding what is happening in the human neuroscientific perspective of our cognition. So it's a kind of a back and forth where we're inching forward with our knowledge. And here's the thing, as we learn more about how learning energy works, we're in a kind of a competition here, because at the same time that we're learning those fundamental processes at an abstraction that we can model, that means we can also make machines that do exactly that. So general AI is this kind of big thing that we're concerned about. What is going to happen when AI can think and learn and self-replicate? It would be best if we understand how humans think so we can optimize that before the singularity of AI that is able to learn and adapt. So that's where we're at. We're at that point in time, and it's pretty exciting. We can kind of choose to make that transformation whenever we want, but we have a timer's going, because there's a lot of smart people that are working on a lot of really amazing research about information, energy, and learning. Okay, so the idea is that this is all oscillating, pulsating waves of energy, and we're thinking in terms of signal and noise, right? So we can have energy that's kind of randomly oriented, or if we have lots of energy that becomes aligned, then that forms a signal, right? So it's a lining of energy patterns and intersections of energy patterns, because essentially we're all fully connected energy. 100% we are fully connected energy. And so our experience, all the way down to the most infinite, highest fidelity detail, is ultimately, we can model that exact same thing in our daily interactions with people around us. And so that's a beautiful thing. So that is where we're going on this. Okay. So energy flows are of integrating intelligence create fractal patterns of growth. And these are just forces. It's just a force. There's no absolute reference frame to anything, because everything's fully interconnected. So essentially, I've come up with this name furry logic, because that is how it feels. That's the level of fidelity of the logic I'm talking about. And what we have is events. Events are true or false. And that is the event history, the prior that led up to where we're at. What's cool is when we have a disruptive situation like COVID, it is the prime opportunity to have a new beginning and to learn from the things that weren't working well. And that's where we're at. I believe that we're going to be using the state of the art in simulations for one, but to solve real world problems. Because just like the donut economics that is being used in Amsterdam, these are easy to simulate systems using system dynamics, which talks about these connections between interacting phenomenon along some dimension. And so with predator-prey, we can look at how those populations change in time. And it's a dynamic balance if we can keep things in balance with feedback loops. And the feedback is the important thing we want to make sure we're looking at is, do we have a closed loop system? Because that's ideal for learning. And in a closed loop system, what we want to be looking at what's the reinforcing positive feedback loops, and what is the negative feedback loops, and what are the time delays, and how is that impacting how things are changing in that system. Okay, so there is no right or wrong. There is no right or wrong, good, bad. Those are all ideas that have been generated by humans. Okay, so information is the fundamental unit of the universe and universal experience. Okay, so we are computational beings and doings, because we oscillate between states of being and states of doing, and that is the rhythm that we want to be kind of aligning with and thinking about that. How would that feel? So humans are actually, we evolved because we were able to communicate and collaborate. And we do it through mirror neurons. That's how we make this connection of energy between humans. And the goal and the reason that humanity is where we are now is because we always were operating on behalf of the collective, because when the collective does well, then everybody does well. It's, instead of being competitive for the individual, everything is like, let's be reasonable and try to have the least harm and the most good. We're not looking for perfection, because events happen, and the trick is to learn how to not necessarily even be making judgments when an event happens. Is this good or bad? And to just kind of surrender a bit, to relax into the flow. Okay, so collaborative, communicative, self-replicating, this is what humans are. This is evolution. So the third revolution, the third industrial revolution, is what we are on the precipice of. It's a singularity, a transformational moment. It's an event. So there's an event on the event horizon that we need to be preparing for. And I've been thinking about that, and this is my suggestion. So we want to be guiding this digital convergence of humanity, and we want to be using and developing computer systems to help us do that. And simulations are really, critical. Everyone should be learning how to think like a simulationist. And we just need to use these resources to solve world problems. And that is essentially well-being, and specifically well-being of children. We want to mitigate the damage that's being done right now to all of the developing brains in the world. Okay, so I'm part of a small group at UT Dallas, and we are doing research on the neuroscience of kindness. And we're looking at how to use contemplative art practice and the language of systems and computer science to share that message. And we'd like to do it across all domains, including games and stories and art. And we would like to make experiences designed to help everyone learn how to use biofeedback to align with the universe. Okay, so ultimately, right, so kindness and COVID. COVID is providing us this opportunity for change, transformational change. And the fact that humanity is designed to be excellent at connecting, compassion, collaboration, creativity. And to do that, we need to learn how to heal our emotions and adjust our emotions. Our emotions are our compass. So we want to be building cultures of wisdom and awe, and these are possible. Poetic, noetic grace. That's the target. Okay, so being humans doing kindness, that's where we want to go. So energy, I'm saying, is dynamic change. And as the Buddha had said, change is the fundamental way things are. There is change. And everything is interconnected, and everything is interdependent. To make a measurement of anything, you need to be an observer, and you need to be defining your reference frame, and then the reference frame of the things you're observing along some dimension that's changing. And that's what Einstein did when he was talking about general relativity, and we can now expand that to universal relativity. Everything is completely connected, and it's fully continuous down to a fractal dimension, which is an interesting thing to think about. Okay, so the way we experience the world is that it is interconnected. The way we talk about that, though, is using words, language developed by humans, and that is discrete concepts. And that is why we think in terms of these pairs, these dualisms of suffering and joy. But they are the same phenomenon. It's just like a compass needle. One end points north and the other end points south. It is one unit that's oscillating in time. Okay, think of a heartbeat. Okay, and it's basically around this idea of learning cycles of growth, and cycles have growth and decay. And so we want to be making sure that we're learning from failure. If a system is in a kind of a decay mode and there is not integration of the negative feedback, then that system will fail. And that is one possible path for humanity. If we don't start to address the well-being of all of the, just the collective, we need to adjust and make that the priority. It has to be the well-being of children. Let's start with that. Okay, so understanding would mean wisdom. If we could understand that is the nature of experience, I think that we can create media and experiences to share that message in a pandemic kind of way. And that will be a game changer. Okay. We had an art contest, and it is having students use this lens of the neuroscience of kindness. They had 5 research articles they could read, and they use the synectics creativity framework, which defines relationships between concepts. So it's all about connecting relationships between relationships, because that is how we learn. So that is how they process their experience of COVID and came up with some just beautiful artwork. It is this contemplative practice of, being aware of your emotions, reflecting on that, and then kind of reappraising, being non-judgmental, non-identifying. We don't really know. There is no distinction between, right? Is something good or bad? And then expressing that. So art, you're actually expressing that in some form. Music, everything. Okay. So experience, right? It is subjective, right? And then objectively, we as humans create words to share ideas. And those are the things that we consider objective. But what does it feel like? So I'm going to suggest that it feels like energy. Feels like energy. That's the confusing part when we think about embodied, because body is material, but it is the force that's moving the body that is the flow of energy, and that is that life force of growth. Okay, so we want to make sure that we understand how to learn from adversity. That's where the maximum amount of learning is. And that basically consciousness theories are that throughout every voxel of space-time, there is an opportunity to have a vector of all sorts of different types of information passing through that point. So we can just think of waves upon waves of energy, and it's distributed throughout the entire universe. Okay, so our emotions are what is kind of our way to tune our emotions to provide us with an orientation and a heading. Okay, so what we do, the process of being human, is that we're always in a kind of trying to predict something. And if an event happens, then that means we observed a change in something. So if an event happens, we observe a change in something, our body immediately wants to predict, hey, how do I respond? Is it a threat? Do I need to react? And then did we respond correctly? If not, let's adjust our emotions. And pain is the emotion of fear, so it has the strongest signal with it, because it's the most important in terms of fast reaction time. Okay, so right now I think that we can think again events, and we make judgments and say, well, that was desired or that wasn't desired, but ultimately it's just change. And so we have a choice of reacting or responding. The reacting would mean that you're taking action based on the emotions. Responding means that you've had time to reflect and kind of get a better perspective, reassess, reappraise. That's responding, and that's the goal. That's in the being stage. This is in the doing stage. We oscillate between those two states. It's when we're in the being state that we actually have two versions of ourselves that we're kind of always hopscotching back and forth between, but we have to remember the current state and we have to compute the next state. And I think that's where we get the mirror neurons. I think that's that shadow part of us in a way. A slight phase delayed secondary wave of information that is, I think it's our mirror neurons. Okay, so number one, when there's an event, really our focus is the most important. Whatever we're focused on is what we're going to be responding to. So if we're talking here about information connection technology, right? This is a torrent of misinformation right now. It's noise, it's distraction. It's not that all technology is bad. We want to be using it in terms of creating experiential medicine, basically games to help people learn how to heal their emotions. And it's a fun thing to think about. But we're living in a fully saturated world of massive amounts of information. And essentially each one of us will be hopefully working and enjoying the path of weaving together these flows of information. And we'll do it with the help of machines. So we each need to be deciding how we engage with information, and that's basically being a steward of our own mind and body. So healthy training. So if we're distracted, then when there's an event, we have this stress activation response. It depends on how our body balance is working, our interoceptive system that can determine what options we can take. If we're stressed, then that reduces our options. We don't have the ability to think creatively. We end up reacting. When we're stressed, we react. That's the fastest way to, kind of ward off any kind of problems. So every one of us has had prior experiences, and that's really how we've built up our system of emotions. When we know that, then and we can imagine that they may be out of balance, then we can take action to find a way to reduce it so that we can be in flow states. We want to be getting glimpses of that flow state and then training ourselves. And we can do that through the neuroplasticity of the human cognition system. Okay, so we want to be learning, adapting, and we want to have the best decision making we can. We want to be able to have some agency in the world. So there's, right now, that if we think about the world as just this swirling ocean of information, do we have self-will? And I believe we do. I believe that if we can we choose how we align ourselves. And if we align ourselves in, towards positive growth, towards well-being, universal well-being, we will be attuned with the natural way that the universal experience unfolds. So that is the nature of universal experience, is this unfolding of just beauty, and it's quite beautiful. Okay, so what do we have? Okay, so humans, this idea of what makes humans special. And humans are special because they learned how to blend, right? Commonality and individuality. And so the hunter-gatherers were able to connect with each other. They were able to communicate so that they could collaborate. And that's the facets that we're going to be looking at, is the connection, working together, collaborating, and communication. Those are the parts of the puzzle. Okay, so I'm saying that we're going to be attuning our emotions. I have my students make a little art project where I would imagine that this is my negative emotions and these are my positive emotions. And by playing with this, I'm still going to get angry. There's plenty of things that are going to have me be angry. I will have very, a wide dynamic range of emotions. But instead of making a judgment that something's bad, I understand that it is just a beautiful pattern of energy, and I choose how to learn from that and move forward. Okay, so once again, the world is event driven. You choose your adventure based on your mindset. Are you resilient? Do you have an open mindset, a growth mindset? So in a story world, we can think about robots and zombies, right? Because a robot's like a rational mind, and the zombies like our emotional, sensing, thinking, responding reptilian. But then demons and ego are really interesting to think about, right? Because Philip Pullman, who did his Dark Materials, he had demons as basically the shadows of ourselves. Whenever we make a judgment, we actually kind of rationalize a story to ourselves. And whatever we think is good and we want to have that quality, we're kind of rejecting all the other qualities, and we can think of them as being our demon, but we want to be whole. We want to love our demon. Our demon is how we can think from 360-degree perspective, because it's a polarity. So our ego and our demons are this polarity of parts that have formed to deal with situations. So this is essentially a journey to self-knowing. It's timeless because these same journeys have happened throughout, and will hopefully continue to keep happening. And so, in a sense, we're saying that the real world is very much analog, fully connected. It's non-dual. You can't separate things. You always have to define a reference frame. But that our words that we use to communicate about these objective ideas are discrete. That's where the dualistic kind of pleasure-pain comes out. This is an experience, and we come up with the words to explain, pleasure-pain. Okay, and so yes, William Blake, without contraries, there is no progression. Attraction and repulsion, right? Yin and yang. Reason and energy, that is my favorite right there. Love and hate are necessary to human existence. It's a really good one. Okay, so what is the role of emotions in learning? So emotions actually have a huge impact on what we focus on. If we're feeling down, we are, often more easily distracted. If we're in a positive mindset, we can more actively be engaged. We can actually be in flow states where we can be innovative. We don't have a fear of failure. It's a curiosity. Einstein was always curious, right? It's the curiosity that is really means you're learning how to get glimpses of living in flow when you're fully creative. So error feedback. This is the idea that we want to be comparing our predictions with the reality, and then correct our models of the world, correct our, extreme emotions. So consolidation, that's what we do when we sleep. We're taking these recent events and we're integrating them into our prior knowledge. Okay, so here's a nice way to think about emotions. This is essentially the compass that I want us to be thinking about. It allows us to kind of process through what would happen in terms of our working our way through difficult situations. So we could say that we notice a change. That is an event, and it feels painful. So this is what we're talking about, something that feels very painful. And so we make a judgment that's not desired. Pain and judgment not desired. Those, it feels like falling, free fall, loss. It's a decay. And we blame. We have this negative affect. So we have this coordinate system where we have affect along the horizontal, and we have kind kind of our action potential on the vertical. Are we calm? Are we in a being state, or are we in the doing state? So this is the being and the doing, and this is the kind of sad shadow area, and this is the happy ego area. So when we have an event that happens, it's highly emotionally charged, we're angry or whatever, if we can just calm down and head toward the being stage, this would have been the fall season, but because we're thinking of cycles and we can make these analogies. So this would be winter, when we're kind of, we're still feeling that is so sad. We don't really quite understand how to process it, but we're kind of hibernating. And so I think this is where we've been with COVID, and now we're here. We are here. We're grieving loss and being very self-loving. That is critical. This is where your child self is. You want to be very self-loving and be a parent and teach your child that didn't understand and developed all these emotions around difficult situations, childhood adversity. Okay, so then once we've kind of worked through that process, we get over here and we're in spring, where we're like seeding new growth, that we're building compassion, we're seeing how we're connected with the whole world because we've reappraised everything. We're in the being love stage here. Now, if we actually are able to stay in this stage to the point where we can take action, we're in the doing stage, and we're doing love here. We're doing kindness. We're collaborating. This is, I didn't even change this. This needs to be summer. This is summer. Okay, so it's this neuroplasticity of emotional attunements that if we can think through this cycle, these cycles of being and doing, cycles of learning from adversity, reflective being, because we want to integrate that negative feedback. When we're stressed, we can't get out of this mindset, and it means we cannot learn very well at all. We have this negative cognitive bias. It is the deficiencies that are shadow, essentially. So the goal is we want to balance out our emotions so that we're not, leaning to the side of being in pain all the time. And in a game world, we just think of this as leveling up, because you interact with things in a game world and you either increase your score, right? That's the kind of reward, or it's about your health, right? Are you getting healthier or less healthy? So learning how to balance those drives is really important. And so in a game, it's easy to imagine these things. So Einstein did not have simulation game engines. So it's very easy for us to think about virtual worlds. And that is why we're here right now, because we make these virtual worlds, and that's how we learn about the world we live in. Okay, so here's another way to look at this. Okay, so here we are, right? And so that's ideal, but in reality, this is really, more of the path. It is like, it's one step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So I think that's important to realize that over here, we need to be self-loving because we are feeling suffering. And when we get over here, we're able to connect with others. This is our social connection, our peers. And then here's when we can actually reach out and connect with others to help them. So this goes through the stages of the isolated agent. This is in a community where you're a child and you're kind of learning, you're in the developmental stage, right? And here's where we're actually feeling connected to the whole world, to the energy of the world. Okay. So Ada Lovelace, symbolic computing. So we are trying to understand how we can think about computing and these abstract concepts to be learning and adapting. So here's something that she wrote, that when we integrate poetry and science, it can change our perception of reality. Mathematical science shows what is. It is the language of unseen relations between things. But to use and apply that language, we must be able to fully appreciate to feel, to seize the unseen, the unconscious. And that is just, couldn't say it better myself. Okay, so here we are with symbolic computing. So we have a whole bunch of icons, right? And so we also have these structures here. So here we can see this dual versus non-dual. That's really the way that the world is, right? We have these oscillating, pulsating, waves, and our human world of processing, right? We make that into discrete values so that we can take data, observations, and so this side over here is all human created. This side over here is nature. Up here we have living, right? Then we're kind of getting down here into nature that's not living. We have these two structures, and these structures are critical. These are the two structures that are used for organization, the organization of energy. So we have a hierarchy down here, which is amazing for storing data because it's easy to go in and it's easy to kind of follow along and see what's going on there. And now this is a network. So a network means we have a bunch of individual units that have some kind of connection across these nodes. And this is the actual structure of reality. This is the structure of human created information. But actually, if we think of this as a hierarchy, really we're talking about holons are a hierarchy of networks where each node is actually a holon itself that can contain an infinite number of smaller holons, so parts and wholes. Okay, so yeah, so okay, so now my research is literally at the cutting edge of computer science and neuroscience and physics, and so this is just came out. I think I have spelled their name wrong. I need to fix that. I think it's Bloom, and they took a year off at Carnegie Mellon to come up with this Turing machine that aligns with the most popular theory of cognition, which is the global workspace theory. So now they have formally created a model of understanding how we learn. What's interesting is that their model doesn't really take into account the difference of being under stress or not being under stress. So that's kind of adding in that new layer of neuroscience of what is the impact of stress on learning, and can we train ourselves to learn from adversity and be in states of flow. So these are the idea of a holarchy is a whole bunch of holons. Each holon we can think of as like a human. So we're capable of self-replicating, and we do that through time. We're capable of learning. We're capable of reproducing. We're capable of collaborating. We're designed to collaborate, but we can also, basically we have functional groupings. There's some functional grouping, and we have nested hierarchical levels of these things. And we can imagine that if we're thinking at the scale of neurons, that emotions end up being these pulses, a dynamic pulse of energy that is a connection across these webs, the neural nets, when we have some prior experience that has made these connections, and they kind of have a 90-second life cycle of this kind of pulse that we recognize as an emotion. And so we're trying to tie together this idea of how this holarchy as a structure of systems, it's a network of networked systems. How does that help us understand how cognition works? Okay. So this is my interpretation of this whole process. So this, I kind of use those icons, the symbolic computing. So the idea is that up in our mind we have a rational logic that corresponds to words that we know, and now corresponds to icons, right? But this is our rational, logical mind. Now down, and this is the stage where, so in the global workspace theory, there's this stage of our short-term memory. And so that is what we actually think of as our consciousness. It's what we are able to be aware of and focus on. So it's this stage. So whatever kind of, there's a competition between all these different ideas, and all these different ideas have emotions tied to them, right? So we have emotions tied to these concrete experiences that we've had, but they've been consolidated into our memories, which aren't exactly, what is reality. So we have these connections. We basically would say this is the heart-mind. That's kind of the contemplative practice perspective of heart-mind having this rhythm. So the parasympathetic nervous system is this heart-mind, and that's the optimal state where we have our mind and our all working together. That's when we can be creative, when we're in flow. So we're in flow. That's why breathing and feeling your heart rate is part of that. Our breathing and heart rate align us with the energy of the universe. Okay, so we can imagine that there's a competition, and here we can see that whatever concepts are associated over here with this rocket ship, it is in competition to hopefully get up to the top and be what's in the focus. Now, this is imagining that we're processing an event. So once the event's happened, right, then up here in the mind, we're going to be broadcasting. So that's top down. We broadcast and tell everybody, hey, here's what happened. See if you need to change anything, right? So this is the bottom up is, the bottom up's a competition, and then the top down is broadcasting this information. So that is kind of a nice way to think of hierarchy. Okay, so yeah, okay. So this is actually the life force of love. So hold on to love is one of my favorite songs. So hold on to love is nice. It's when you can hold on to that idea that we're all just connected, pulsating like music, energy. So dynamics of learning, these are dynamic patterns. These are cycles of growth and decay, and we can think of them as the seasons that we went through. Okay, so the structure is these hierarchical networks. The holon is the structure. Human ontogeny is that we want to be operating in the heart-mind, because then we nurture mutual intentionality, and that's how humanity survives. But down here, what does it feel like? Well, it feels like information flows. So that's this, like our soul. Our soul is down here someplace, right? It is this, the collective unconscious is a thing, right? Okay, so what does it feel like? And we have all these experiences that have these tinges of emotions, and basically this is our neural network. And we're essentially, this is a connection that goes from the cellular level of chemical neurotransmitters. That's the atoms meets the bits, right down here. That's where the energy is stored. Over here, right, we have this idea of the rational mind, right? And up here, right, it's really our culture. Our culture is what really it determines a lot of the concepts that we have. So ultimately, we need to be learning how to communicate so we can collaborate. And that's through connections that are trustworthy, and we can all agree that we're aligned for some mission that is essentially compassionate. So the idea is this is a functional language to be understanding the nature of reality for human beings. Okay, so I couldn't resist, right? This is the top down, and this is essentially if we are in a reactive mode, so we take action over here, we're in a reactive mode, then our rational mind it becomes the interpreter. It makes up a logical reason for why we did what we did, and that is the ego, or our yang energy, right? The individual, the one, and very much tied up into our belief systems, very black and white, Boolean logic. But in order to have really well-functioning computers, we've learned to use fuzzy logic, where it's multi-valued. This is 0 and 1. This is multi-valued, like a Likert scale, not very much, very much. Likert scale is fuzzy logic. This is our long-term memory, bottom-up competition. But over here, I'm kind of trying to have us think about this as the area of heart-mind. This is where we have furry logic. This is furry logic because, right, it's like our pets. Our pets help us understand. That's what feels really good. Feels really good to be, kind of with our pets. So when we're in that flow stage, in the furry logic stage, at that level of fidelity, that's when we can, with good flow, that's when we can have innovation and wisdom, when we're in those glimpse practices. Okay, otherwise down here, if we're reacting, it's basically on our unmet needs, as Maslow called it, our deficiency needs. Okay, so models of consciousness. So the theory of computer science, and modeling and simulation use this idea of the holon as the fundamental system that can be used to explain these concepts, humanist concepts of behavior across all scales and all dimensions. So it is a universal language. So this needs to be taught. What does a holon and what is an inframon? So this is my argument, is that we need to be teaching about complex systems. Okay, so a holarchy is a whole bunch of nested ones. What we can see is that we have this pulsating in multi-dimensions, right? Multi-dimensional pulsating waves of energy. And it basically has these fractal patterns, and we see those fractal patterns in condensed matter, snowflakes, etc. So these are dynamic patterns. Energy is proportional to mass, right? I just took the speed of light out of there, right? Speed of light is basically just telling us like position and time, right? When did the event happen? But energy is proportional to mass, because the mass is the atoms. That's where we're storing these patterns of energy. They're stored in mass. The bits are the information, and like I said, the speed of light is giving us some dimensions on space-time. But essentially, we're thinking about the energy as a vector, basically of information that is based on all of the Fourier analysis of all of the waves of energy that are occurring at that point in space-time is one way to look at it. Okay, so this is actually it is Einstein's theory. It's his unified field theory. This is not new. So in computer science, there have been people that have been doing amazing research and shown that the math of these systems actually works out perfectly to solve Einstein's unified field theory. And we can think of it, right? Einstein was like, this should feel simple. The right answer should feel simple, and that is where we're at. It is information, and it's energy flows of information, and that we can think of that in a virtual world, whereas he was working with atoms, and so anyway, condensed matter, right? So this is material. Okay, so the conscious Turing machine and global workspace theory, they let us see how this ties into human cognition, whereas these are like self-adaptive, self-organizing units, agents. Okay, so hidden forces, right? So now we know we have these information flows, they're dynamic patterns, and Andy Clark wrote a book about cognition, basically that certain forms of human cognizing include inextricable tangles of feedback, feed forward and feed around loops that promiscuously crisscross the boundaries of brain, body, and world. And that will continue to be more and more so as we get more integrated with the AI that we're creating. Okay, so the idea is that this is transcending a reductionist perspective because we're looking at things from a holistic perspective. We're stepping up a level. Okay, and this is amazing. So in physics, in the physics world, they are running simulations, and they are seeing these kind of flows of energy, and they're seeing it in impacting condensed matter at the nanoscopic scales. So here, instead of imagining quantum particles pushed around, instead of imagining quantum particles pushed around by fractal quantum fluctuations, we can think of the fundamental fabric of space-time itself as having a fractal geometry. It's so interesting. We're moving through experience in fractal patterns, and you can imagine it as a cauliflower, right? It's ever expanding in that we choose among all of the possible universes that we could go into based on our orientation and heading at every moment in time. What's our goal? Okay. So yeah, this is scientists are discovering fractal patterns in quantum material. This is 2021, 2020, and 2021. This is the state of the art across all these fields. And Holon is the system language that can be used to understand all of these phenomena. So it was completely unexpected. It was serendipity. If the material has a sort of memory, and so they were working with a material that did have a memory, magnetic memory, you could have a system that's robust against external perturbations. So even if subjected to heat, the information is not lost. These forces are the forces of life, right? These are the forces of life. Okay, and so once again, the state-of-the-art in fluid hydrodynamics, they're kind of trying to think of these as analogs for behaviors, phenomenon at any scale, right? At any scale. So we can think of this as quantum analogs. So once they realize that, then they can say, all right, well, let's just see if we can put some small dye on water and have a little bug crawl across it, and can we see these fractal patterns that are generating out? This is water droplets that are also having this kind of fishbone lattice pattern. So as the flow rates increase, waves are excited on the sheet, this is talking about the bottom, and the fluid rims become unstable. The rim appears blurred to the naked eye. However, strobe illumination reveals remarkably regular and striking flow instability. The resulting flow takes the form of fluid fishbones, with the fluid sheet being the fish head and the tendrils its bones. Increasing the flow rate serves to broaden the fishbones. So these are energy phenomena. And these same ideas are also applicable across every domain. So in business, right, if we want to have innovation, we want to be thinking exactly this. When do we have a good opportunity for seeding new change? It's when we're in a disruption and a disturbance, just like we are with COVID, because we know that there will never be that normal that we had before. So COVID is a singularity, and I'm suggesting that we take advantage of it from a academic, from everybody. Let's all join in. There's a lot of smart people that are all on the cutting edge, and I think Holons provide the language, and we should be teaching this to children. Okay, so basically this is talking about innovation. True innovation follows strategy and is guided by insights and analysis. So think of this as a vector. A vector requires direction and magnitude. So this direction, this orientation, that's what our emotions are. Our compass give us orientation, right? And its starting point and direction are determined by a thorough understanding of your competitive position and strategic direction, and its magnitude represents the risk versus reward. So these phenomenon can explain basically phenomenon at every scale. Okay, so creative cognition and mental representations. Creativity results from a combination of representations. External representations such as diagrams can be useful in creative activities as long as they interface with the internal mental representations. Concepts are in this semantic pointer architecture, basically are this idea that we have a word as of shallow kind of meaning, and that through the connections of our emotions, it is connecting to the kind of situation, the context situation. So the word that is the concept is very abstract, but it's the emotions that connect with concrete instances. So that is why we have this cognitive, affective, and somatic sensory motor cognition. So concept learning is this neural convolution of this energy, a spike of energy that connects these ideas. Okay, so here's links to Neuroscience of Kindness, our website, and here's the gift book. I'm having my students learn how to curate their own learning. I believe that's really important because it will help us learn how to engage with information. Okay, so I will stop there. Thank you.